Foundations of Amateur Radio. As you might recall, most of my radio activity is done away from my shack. I tend to operate portable, camping, sitting on a jetty, or using a picnic table while a barbecue is going nearby. For me, operating with my car as a mobile base made more sense than trying to cram an antenna in a home with little or no garden. Putting a radio in a car can be as simple as bringing a handheld and hanging it from the rearview mirror, or it can involve a mobile phone mount that allows you to clamp it in place. Pretty soon you'll want to have an antenna on the outside of the car, so then you start figuring out how to make it go through the car without needing to drill holes and sparking the ire of the other users of the car. Not long after that, you'll want to charge it. Then the microphone will become inconvenient, changing frequency, using it for more than talking on the local repeater. Eventually, you might well get to the point that a handheld is no longer appropriate. Without telling you which radio to buy, since there are many different ones to choose from, with different specifications, different pricing, different functions and different sizes, there are plenty of roadblocks to radio bliss in the car. The very first one is where to put the radio. If your radio has a detachable front, that is, the buttons and display can be separated from the main body, you'll have more options. But if that's not possible, you'll likely need to find somewhere near, and preferably visible, to where you'll be using it. There are transceivers that fit into a standard car radio opening, which might come in handy if your car comes with all manner of bezels and curves. You might find a spot in the center console, or overhead. If you can put the transceiver in one spot and the head in another, then you can put the radio in any little hidey hole, for example under the passenger seat, or in the luggage compartment, in the glove box, or behind the driver's seat. When you're looking for a spot, consider how you're going to get electricity to it and how you're going to connect the antenna. You'll likely need to connect the power supply wire directly to the battery, which might determine how the power gets into the cabin of the car. If you can drill holes in your car, you'll have extra options, but consider that you'll need to protect the wire that goes through those holes, and you'll also need to protect the steel, given that once you drilled that hole, it's no longer protected by paint from rusting. The same is true for the antenna. Can you use an existing path, or do you need to make a new one? If you put the radio in the luggage compartment, can the antenna lead exit that, and what happens if it rains? In my setup, I have an all-band radio. It does HF, VHF and UHF, but I didn't want to have multiple antennas on the car. The radio has multiple sockets, so I used a coax switch that's connected to an antenna mount on the rear of the car, and ran two lines back to the radio, so I can switch between HF and VHF. Of course, I need to swap out the antenna, but I'm not switching whilst I'm driving, so that's no problem. Other things to consider are what noise comes from the car. I don't mean the zoom-zoom noise, I mean the noise from things like the alternator. How will you deal with that? What about grounding? How will you make the ground plane of the antenna? Can you use braid to connect the various panels of the vehicle to each other? If your mount is temporary, like for example a magnetic mount, how will you protect the paintwork? Can you clamp something across an edge, or will you need to drill a hole? If you're at all unsure, then try some setups. Run a temporary power supply through a door, figure out where stuff goes, look at what your friends have done, test it by going out, park somewhere, and try to use it for real. It can be daunting to set up a car, but it is very rewarding, and it's a great way to get used to the many aspects that are involved once you dive into this hobby. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.